Liberation Maiden revolves around a lady known as Shoko, who reigns as president over New Japan. After she learns of a country invading her land and stealing the energy it produces, she takes up the fight and enters her mech known as Kamui. Originally, this game was part of a compilation. Now what makes the experience stand out is the incredibly addictive gameplay that sees the action take the form of a 3D shoot 'em up, and instead of mindlessly blowing things up, the main purpose is to purify each area and return each environment to its original beauty. It's a neat little twist that injects a breath of fresh air to an otherwise tired genre, and with it being open-ended in nature, the game rewards those that feel the need to explore, with each level possessing a percentage marker corresponding to how pure the area has become, which ultimately results in higher scores for players that take their time and thoroughly search each environment. To top this off, it's also available on iOS for those who may not have access to a Nintendo 3DS, making it easier than ever to jump into this little gem. Taking place on a planet known as Melodia, the player takes up the role of a young boy named Tempo, who lives on the planet with his trusty rabbit sidekick known as Tappy. After a mysterious evil force invades the planet, it's Tempo's job to combat the threat through the use of his musical prowess and bring an end to the threat once and for all. As you would imagine, due to the premise of the adventure, the experience is highly influenced by music, and is what the gameplay primarily centers around. Each stage is presented in a side-scrolling manner, with Tempo possessing the ability to jump and also swing his staff to ultimately collect the various amounts of musical notes scattered throughout each stage. Doing this in time with the music awards you a higher score, resulting in faster versions of each level becoming available to the player, which provides a lot of extra challenge for those who have mastered its gameplay. This one flew under the radar upon its release, and really deserves a lot more praise than it initially got, so if you're looking for a fun little title to waste a few hours on, Harmo Knight is the perfect choice. Runny is essentially a platformer. It shares many similarities with the likes of Sonic due to its incredibly fast style of play and mechanics that emulate Sega's well-known mascot. The goal of each stage is to ultimately collect as many chicks as possible, whilst avoiding a wide array of enemies and obstacles that litter the path in front of you. But what makes it stand out is the way in which it approaches the design of each level. Instead of presenting a standard start to finish, the player instead has the option to take several branching paths that possess optional objectives and items to collect. It's a nice inclusion which manages to break up the usual formula that many platformers fall into. Visually, Runny Egg presents a colourful and playful world to experience, which is a nice addition and contributes to the overall jolly nature of the proceedings. Overall, if you're looking for a competent little platformer to pass the time with, Runny Egg will provide that and much more. This cute little action game sees the player taking up a quest in which they must step into the role of a hero to ultimately stop an evil deity from taking over the land. The player must travel the kingdom and gather blood from the various creatures that have been summoned by the demon, all the while keeping their companion alive. It's a pretty simple setup, but really comes into its own with the addictive gameplay it presents. The action takes place from a top-down perspective, with the gameplay revolving around protecting the members of your party and defeating the huge variety of monsters and animals that come at you from all directions. Dealing damage is handled very differently to most games, with the player just having to run into enemies in order to take them out. In doing so, damage is also dealt to yourself. It's quite essential to get used to this concept, especially in the latter parts of the experience. The third in the series is a great improvement upon the previous titles that have come before. A lot more content and depth is on offer, which in all honesty makes this the perfect version to jump into. Farren tasks the player with taking on the role of a heroine, with her goal being to ultimately locate and secure free spirit icons in order to bring an end to the Scourge, a terrifying evil that consumes the land once every 100 years. Through the use of these spirit icons, it's possible to conceal this evil, and this is where the adventure begins. Now, Farren takes on an almost 80s retro aesthetic. If you are fond of the several RPGs of old, you'll feel right at home here. It shares many similarities with the Ys series, with enemies only having to be walked into in order to attack. If they are a higher level, the player will take damage, but if they are lower, they shall be defeated. It's a great system that really facilitates the exploration of the world. A huge focus upon puzzles is also present within the game, and this is where Farren really begins to shine. There's no hand-holding, which results in some truly head-scratching moments when trying to move forward, but it makes the feeling of finally overcoming every obstacle all the more meaningful. If you're looking for a cute little RPG, Farren has got it all, and with it now also being available on the Switch, there's even more ways to play through it. Mercenary Saga 2 takes many cues from the likes of Final Fantasy Tactics. Although nowhere near as well executed, it still manages to provide a solid and competent experience that will satisfy both fans of the genre and newcomers alike, with its well thought out narrative and in-depth mechanics. The events that unfold revolve around a man named Claude and his group of mercenaries that fight for the kingdom under the title known as Order of the Silver Eagle. The gameplay takes place from an isometric point of view and tasks the player with overcoming a huge variety of enemies with a vast amount of skills and abilities at their disposal. As you would expect, a pretty robust leveling up system is in place, as well as a whole host of different styles of equipment that can aid you both on and off the field. As mentioned before, it's not at all on the same level when compared to the games that have clearly influenced it, but nonetheless it will offer up a great time for those willing to see past its shortcomings. AI Race differs from the many racing titles available on the system for the sheer reason that you're not exactly racing anyone else whilst playing. Instead, the game focuses on achieving the fastest time possible, which at first can seem quite off-putting to some players, but after some time with AI Race, it soon becomes apparent that there is much more to the game that meets the eye. It's an incredibly accessible experience. The acceleration of your vehicle is handled automatically, with the steering of it assigned to the face buttons or stylus. But if we're being honest, the best way to play it is with the face buttons, as it provides a more tactile form of input that becomes extremely important when trying to make your way around some of the game's more intricate tracks. This isn't at all an easy game. Failure really is the order of the day, especially in the latter half of the game, which will see you constantly being thrown back to the beginning of each track as you begrudgingly make your way through it. I know it sounds like I'm bashing it, but that feeling of finally making it through a track without hitting a thing is something that will stay with you for a long time and severely outweighs the hardships you'll endure to get there. Topia tasks the player with overcoming a great evil known as the Dark Lord, whose magic is stealing the faces of various citizens that populate the kingdom and swapping them with otherwise faceless monsters. But what makes Topia even more charming is the fact that the entire cast can be made up of the various Miis you may have created on your system. There's seriously nothing that brings a smile to my face more than coming across family members or friends in the world, which manages to add an overall jolly atmosphere to the otherwise daunting task of bringing down the Dark Lord. But where Topia really comes into its own is with the truly compelling gameplay. For those who may have experienced Tomodachi Life, several aspects of Topia will feel instantly familiar. It's essentially an RPG. It relies on many of the tropes that have held the genre up for so long, so you can expect to be leveling up, coming across various weapons, items and equipment that all possess their own unique attributes, as well as a pretty solid turn-based battling system. It possesses all of the pieces that make up a great RPG. Although not as intricate as some players would perhaps prefer, it's clear this is a casual experience that welcomes players of all ages and skill levels. Little Battler's experience is essentially Level 5's take on the Pokemon formula that has remained insanely popular throughout the years, but instead of the focus being upon cute little critters, the game instead swaps them out for miniature robots. The journey starts off with the player assuming the role of a young boy known as Van Yamamoto, who is given his first miniature robot against the wishes of his mother. Disregarding how she feels, Van is set on using his robot in the hopes of ultimately becoming closer to his father. It's a simple setup that manages to serve the journey well, with some surprisingly touching moments throughout the duration of the experience. One of the finest aspects of the game is the sheer level of customization available to the player. Each robot can be fully customized to your liking and playstyle, may that be a focus upon damage, defense, or even a mix of the two. It also affects how battles play out in a meaningful way. If you've made a mistake in your loadout, it clearly becomes apparent during a confrontation, and this is where the game truly begins to shine. Making moves is tied to something called the tension meter that determines how many moves you can execute before having to cool down for a few turns before being able to get back into the action. At times it's really nail-biting stuff, but on the other hand it's a completely fair system that rewards those that take their time and develop strategies in order to overcome the various adversaries you will encounter throughout the journey. Puzzle & Dragons tasks the player with overcoming a great evil that is intent on shattering the entire world into small puzzle-shaped pieces. It sees you traversing the land and entering several dungeons. Upon entering each dungeon, you are asked to summon a team of dragons that will accompany you, but instead of having direct control over the dragons, they are instead tied to several different types of orbs, such as fire, wood, water, and light for example. Upon lining up 3 or more of the same orbs, the dragon type matching the row will attack, unleashing devastating damage damage corresponding with their level. To top all of this off, this version comes with a Super Mario themed mode, which as you would expect swaps out the dragons and orbs for several Nintendo themed characters. It's a really fun mode, although limiting due to the number of designs available, is still a nice inclusion and makes it the best version to pick up. I'd say if you're fond of games like Pokemon Link, you'll definitely find something here that will satisfy you.